The conference room fell silent as Director Marcus Bellamy cleared his throat. I sat in the back row, my quarterly metrics spread before me. Highest client retention in the division at 96%, 3 major accounts personally saved from cancellation, revenue up 34% under my direct leadership. My team had even sent congratulations texts that morning. Absolutely certain my name would be called for the senior manager promotion everyone had been discussing. After careful consideration, Marcus announced, adjusting his glasses with deliberate slowness, I'm pleased to promote Kyle Henderson to Senior Manager of Client Operations. The room erupted in polite applause. I sat completely frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the conference table so tightly my knuckles turned white. Kyle, Marcus's protégé, hired just 18 months ago with minimal industry experience, stood and shook hands enthusiastically around the table, accepting congratulations with practiced humility that looked almost rehearsed. When Kyle caught my eye briefly, something flickered across his face. Not sympathy or embarrassment. Something closer to satisfaction, like he'd won a competition I hadn't even known we were having. Marcus continued reading Kyle's accomplishments aloud, each one sounding strangely familiar, like echoes of achievements I remembered differently. The Thornfield account recovery. The Morrison contract negotiation. Strategic initiatives I could have sworn I personally developed. When he finished the glowing tribute, he added almost as an afterthought, his eyes never quite meeting mine across the room, Amanda lacks the executive presence we need at this level. Name. My missing promotion. My entire career trajectory. Explained away and publicly dismissed in 7 casual words. I walked back to my desk through a hallway that suddenly felt 3 times longer than usual, each step requiring conscious effort. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the carpet pattern dizzying. Colleagues who had enthusiastically congratulated me earlier that morning now suddenly found their computer screens absolutely fascinating, their discomfort practically radiating through the air. They looked anywhere but directly at me. My team clustered near the coffee station, their confusion and concern written plainly across their faces. They knew my numbers. They had watched me negotiate impossible deals, save failing accounts, and mentor junior staff through countless crises. Everyone in client operations knew my performance metrics. The whispers had already started flowing through the department. I powered on my computer, hands remarkably steady despite the rage and humiliation building steadily in my chest. An email notification popped up immediately. Patricia Holmes from Strategy and Systems. She had been sitting in the back during Marcus's announcement. Can we talk? Privately. Parking garage in 20 minutes. I met her exactly 20 minutes later. Patricia leaned against her silver sedan, arms folded defensively across her chest, looking profoundly uncomfortable. That promotion decision was made 3 months ago, she said quietly. I saw the succession planning documents during a cross-departmental review in April. Your name was never even on the consideration list. 3 months ago. While I was landing the Thornfield account and working 16-hour days. While Marcus was publicly praising my leadership in team meetings. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling until 2 a.m., then finally gave up and opened my laptop. I pulled up my performance dashboard, the internal system that meticulously tracked every metric, every client interaction, every single revenue dollar generated. My scores dominated the rankings. Highest client satisfaction rating. Lowest account churn rate. Most revenue growth. Top performer for 8 consecutive quarters without a single decline. Then I logged into the executive view, the summary reports that senior leadership actually reviewed during promotion decisions. My stomach dropped immediately. My metrics looked completely different here, as if I was viewing someone else's mediocre career instead of my own documented excellence. The Thornfield account, which I had personally rescued from cancellation through 3 months of intense negotiation, showed vaguely as team effort collaborative win, with no primary owner listed anywhere. My exceptional 96% client retention numbers were buried and grouped generically with the entire division's average of 73%. My revenue growth was dismissively attributed to favorable market conditions and industry trends, rather than strategic account management. Every single achievement that made me stand out, every metric that should have made me the obvious promotion choice, had been systematically diluted, diminished, or completely removed. I took screenshots of everything, methodically comparing the raw performance data to the sanitized executive summaries. The pattern was absolutely undeniable. This was deliberate, calculated manipulation. Over the next week, I became completely obsessed. I pulled quarterly performance reports going back 2 full years and compared them line by line to my archived backup files that I maintained independently. Every discrepancy, without exception, pointed to the exact same disturbing conclusion. My documented performance had been systematically downgraded in executive-level documents while remaining completely unchanged in the operational systems where the actual work was tracked. In my personal backup files from Q3 of last year, I was clearly listed as lead strategist on the Morrison account, the one that had nearly imploded before I salvaged it. In the official executive report that Marcus submitted to the board, Kyle was suddenly listed as lead strategist, with me relegated to supporting team member providing research assistance. The Patterson deal, which I had personally saved from complete collapse through emergency weekend negotiations, showed up in Marcus's reports as simply collaborative team effort demonstrating division resilience. My name didn't appear anywhere in the executive summary. My client satisfaction scores, averaging an exceptional 4.8 out of 5.0 with multiple handwritten thank you notes from client executives, didn't appear in any executive summary at all. This pattern wasn't accidental. This wasn't administrative oversight. This was deliberate, methodical, sustained manipulation of my professional record over at least 18 months. I started studying Kyle's career trajectory with the same analytical intensity one usually reserved for competitive market analysis. He had been hired 18 months ago with decent credentials but absolutely no exceptional track record to speak of. His resume showed mid-level experience at smaller firms, nothing suggesting superstar potential. His very first assignment had been shadowing me on the Hartwell account negotiation. I had trained him personally, mentored him through client relationship basics, introduced him to my entire professional network, and shared strategic frameworks I had spent years developing. Within just 6 months of his hire date, Kyle was suddenly leading his own accounts, except they weren't actually new accounts. They were my former clients, people I had built relationships with over years of excellent service. Marcus had quietly reassigned them one by one, always with some bland explanation about workload rebalancing or developmental opportunities. Within 1 year, Kyle was presenting at board meetings, using the exact strategies and client management frameworks I had developed. His presentation slides looked remarkably similar to my internal training documents. Every opportunity, every high-profile project, every prestigious client introduction traced directly back to Marcus's deliberate intervention. Kyle didn't build his success through talent or hard work. It was carefully constructed for him, using resources that should have been supporting my advancement. I found emails from 8 months ago where Marcus specifically requested Kyle be added to my important client calls, purely for exposure. That exposure had become Kyle taking full credit for my work. I decided I needed to see the formal evaluation logs, the detailed confidential notes from my quarterly performance reviews. I needed to understand exactly what Marcus had been writing about my performance. I submitted a formal HR request through the employee portal. HR denied my request within exactly 1 hour. Evaluation logs are restricted by executive authorization. Please contact your direct supervisor for access requests. My direct supervisor was Marcus, the man who had just blocked my promotion. I would be asking the Fox for permission to investigate the henhouse. I filed a formal written request anyway, citing 3 specific employee handbook policies about performance transparency and documentation access rights. The response came directly from Marcus himself this time. Amanda, these records are confidential management tools designed for leadership development purposes. Your request for access suggests you're not appropriately focused on moving forward professionally. This kind of backward-looking mindset is exactly what concerns me about your readiness for senior leadership. Let's schedule a one-on-one meeting next week to discuss your specific development areas. He controlled the performance narrative. He controlled the official records. He controlled the evaluation data. And now he was actively questioning my professionalism simply for requesting access to documentation about my own work performance. The manipulation was complete. I spent 3 intensive days researching every internal transfer opportunity currently posted on the company careers portal, looking for anything that would get me out from under Marcus's authority while still maintaining my professional trajectory. Strategy and Systems had a senior analyst opening, technically lateral to my current position but in a completely different division with completely different reporting structures and, most importantly, different access permissions to company data systems. The role would give me legitimate access to cross-departmental performance data and enterprise reporting systems as part of my normal job responsibilities. I would be able to see everything, analyze everything, compare everything across the entire company. Patricia encouraged me enthusiastically when I mentioned the opportunity. You would be absolutely perfect for that role. Your analytical skills are exceptional, and Vincent Cruz, who runs that department, actually values competence over politics. Plus, you would finally get away from Marcus. I submitted my application that same afternoon. The hiring manager, Vincent Cruz, called me just 2 days later. Your background is genuinely impressive, Amanda. Your performance metrics speak for themselves. And Patricia gave you an absolutely glowing recommendation. When can you start? 3 weeks later I packed up my desk. Marcus barely acknowledged my departure. Kyle threw me an awkward goodbye party that felt more like a victory celebration for him. But Marcus had made a critical mistake. In Strategy and Systems, I would have system administrator access to performance data across the entire company, including client operations, including every edit Marcus had ever made. My first official week in Strategy and Systems, Vincent assigned me to audit reporting inconsistencies across all departments. It was almost comically perfect. I started with system access logs, the comprehensive digital trail that tracked who edited which files, when they accessed them, and what specific changes they made. The client operations performance files showed dozens of late-night edits over the past 2 years, all originating from the same system credentials. M.Bellamy. Marcus had logged into the executive reporting system at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March and spent exactly 43 minutes meticulously editing my Q1 performance summary. He systematically removed my name from 3 major client deals and reassigned all credit to Kyle Henderson. The raw operational data remained completely unchanged, but the executive summary told a completely fabricated story. I found similar suspicious patterns across 18 months. Each time a promotion cycle or compensation review approached, Marcus would access the system after normal business hours and carefully, methodically adjust the narrative. I documented absolutely everything with obsessive precision. Screenshots with timestamps, edit history logs, before and after comparison documents. I created an encrypted folder on my personal cloud drive and backed up every single piece of evidence in 3 separate secure locations. This was no longer just about my blocked promotion. This was about systematic fraud, deliberate manipulation of corporate records, and calculated sabotage. This was evidence that would hold up under scrutiny. The real breakthrough came when I accessed the client feedback database, the records of satisfaction surveys that clients submitted quarterly about their account managers. These surveys went directly to an external third-party vendor who compiled them into detailed reports. I pulled 2 complete years of client feedback data for everyone in client operations. My ratings were exceptional by any measure. Multiple clients had specifically mentioned me by name, praising my responsiveness, strategic thinking, and genuine commitment to their success. My average score was 4.8 out of 5, with some quarters reaching 4.9. But when I accessed the versions that had actually been forwarded to executive leadership for review, my individual scores had been completely stripped out. Deleted. The reports showed only bland division-wide averages. Kyle's individual scores, by contrast, were prominently featured in every single executive report. His average rating was 4.1. Good but not exceptional and significantly lower than mine. Yet his specific feedback quotes appeared in every executive summary. The truth that the raw data told and the story that Marcus's curated narrative presented were two completely different versions of reality. And I now had documentation proving exactly how he had manipulated the truth to serve his predetermined outcome. I expanded my investigation and discovered something that fundamentally changed the entire scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just career sabotage anymore. Marcus had been reallocating project budgets and revenue attribution to artificially inflate Kyle's apparent profitability and business impact. The Thornfield account, which I had personally landed through 6 months of relationship development and then managed successfully for 2 full years, had generated $2.3 million in verified revenue. But in the budget reports that Marcus submitted to the finance department and the executive team, he had shifted $800,000 of that documented revenue to Kyle's client portfolio. This wasn't just favoritism or unconscious bias anymore. This was deliberate financial manipulation. This was budget misrepresentation. This was potentially fraudulent reporting to the board of directors. I cross-referenced every single account transfer, every budget reallocation, every revenue attribution change over the past 18 months. The pattern was undeniable and systematic. Marcus was artificially inflating Kyle's performance metrics by methodically stealing credit and resources from other team members, primarily from me. I found evidence of at least 2 other employees whose work had also been quietly reassigned to boost Kyle's record. I added all of this financial documentation to my encrypted evidence archive. What had started as documentation of a personal grievance had evolved into evidence of corporate fraud. Over the next month, I became absolutely meticulous about documentation. Every document I discovered, every edit log I analyzed, every budget discrepancy I uncovered, every timeline I reconstructed, everything went into my continuously expanding private archive. I organized it all chronologically with detailed executive summaries explaining the significance of each piece and how it connected to the larger pattern of systematic manipulation. I had emails showing Marcus enthusiastically praising my client work and communications to those same clients, while simultaneously downgrading my performance in official internal reports. I had time-stamped system logs proving his pattern of after-hours editing. I had budget documents demonstrating systematic fund misallocation and false revenue attribution. I had client feedback surveys proving my actual performance level versus the diminished narrative he had constructed. This archive wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't about my hurt feelings or wounded professional pride. This was about accountability, about truth, about ensuring that no one else would have their career sabotaged the way mine had been. I encrypted everything with military-grade security protocols. 1 complete copy stayed on my personal laptop. 1 full backup lived in my secure cloud service. 1 comprehensive copy resided on a USB drive in my home safety deposit box. I was ready for whatever came next. But the timing had to be exactly right. At work, I transformed myself into the absolute model of a perfect, uncontroversial employee. Polite to everyone. Professionally collaborative. Focused entirely on my new responsibilities. I attended department meetings where Marcus occasionally presented, smiled appropriately during his self-congratulatory speeches, and never once mentioned my old role or the circumstances of my transfer. I watched him gradually relax over the following weeks. His shoulders became less tense when I was in the room. He stopped monitoring my movements and my communications. He clearly believed I had accepted my diminished place, that I was moving on quietly like he wanted. In the occasional cross-departmental meetings where I still interacted with client operations staff, Kyle would present strategies that I had personally developed over years of client work. Marcus would nod approvingly, sometimes adding praise about Kyle's innovative thinking. I would take careful notes and say absolutely nothing. Patricia asked me one afternoon if I was planning something. "You're too calm. You're too composed. I've seen people get passed over for promotions before, and they don't act like you're acting." I just smiled and said calmly, "I'm focused on my new role and learning the procedures. That's all." But every single night, I sat at my home computer and reviewed my evidence archive. making absolutely sure every connection was crystal clear, every timeline verified, every piece of supporting evidence linked to the main narrative. I didn't file a formal complaint through HR or request any kind of official investigation. That would have gone through the standard corporate channels where Marcus had established relationships and built protective networks over his 12 years with the company. Instead, I used my new position in strategy and systems to submit data anomalies through the company's automated risk management system, a relatively new compliance platform implemented last year. The system was specifically designed to flag unusual patterns in financial data, performance metrics, or operational inconsistencies. It was completely algorithm-driven, supposedly anonymous, and initiated automatic compliance reviews when certain thresholds were exceeded. I carefully submitted 3 separate anomaly reports over a 2-week period, each one highlighting different specific aspects of the client operations data irregularities without ever mentioning Marcus by name. Budget misallocation patterns in one report. Performance metric inconsistencies in the second. Unauthorized after-hours system access patterns in the third. I never mentioned Marcus explicitly. I just provided the precise data coordinates where the anomalies existed. The algorithm would trace them back to their source automatically. 2 weeks after my final anonymous submission, a bright red compliance flag appeared prominently in the corporate risk management dashboard. The automated message was stark. Investigation initiated. Client Operations Division. Financial reporting irregularities detected. The system had taken the bait. The official email went out to all department heads on a Monday morning at exactly 8 a.m. Compliance review scheduled for Client Operations Division. All division leaders must submit complete raw performance data and comprehensive budget documentation by Friday end of business. No exceptions. I sat at my desk and watched the message arrive in my inbox. Within an hour, Patricia texted me that Marcus had called an emergency meeting with his entire senior staff. His voice reportedly tight with barely controlled panic. Kyle sent me a cautious message later that afternoon. Do you know what this compliance review is about? Marcus seems really stressed and won't tell us anything specific. I replied simply and neutrally. No idea. Probably just routine audit procedures. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. But I knew exactly what was happening with crystal clarity. The compliance system had detected too many statistical anomalies, too many unexplainable patterns, too many red flags in the data. Now human investigators with subpoena power and audit authority would review everything with fresh eyes. They would see exactly what I had seen: the edited files, the misallocated budgets, the systematic manipulation of performance records. Marcus couldn't edit his way out of this investigation. The original files were archived in systems he couldn't access without leaving traces. The truth was about to surface whether he wanted it to or not. Over the next week, I watched the quiet panic spread through client operations like a virus. Kyle started staying late every night, reviewing old files, asking increasingly worried questions that no one could answer satisfactorily. He had built his entire career on Marcus's deliberate manipulation, and somewhere deep in his gut, he was starting to suspect that something fundamentally wasn't right about his rapid success. I saw him in the cafeteria one afternoon, sitting alone at a corner table, staring intently at his laptop screen with an expression of growing confusion and concern. When he noticed me standing there, he actually waved me over urgently. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was uncertain, lacking all the confident swagger from the promotion announcement. "Sure, of course. Did you ever feel like things weren't quite adding up? In client operations? Like the stories we were told didn't quite match reality?" I sat down across from him carefully. "What do you mean specifically?" "I don't know exactly. The compliance review has me going through old files, trying to document everything. Some of the major accounts credited to me in the executive reports, I barely remember actually working on them at all. The Thornfield account especially. Maybe you should talk to Marcus about it," I suggested neutrally. He nodded slowly, but the doubt in his expression communicated everything. He was finally starting to realize his success might have been manufactured. 4 weeks after the initial compliance flag appeared, the investigation team scheduled a comprehensive full division review. Every department manager would be required to present their team's performance data directly to the executive committee. All raw operational files would be submitted to an independent external auditor. The email from the CFO's office was formal and uncomfortably specific. Complete data reconciliation required. Historical records will be systematically cross-referenced against current reporting. All discrepancies must be explained satisfactorily with supporting documentation. I understood immediately what this meant. The company was actively looking for the source of the anomalies. They would methodically compare Marcus's carefully crafted executive summaries against the actual archived operational data. They would see every edit he made, every budget reallocation he authorized, every manipulated metric he had submitted to leadership. Marcus had exactly 4 weeks to somehow explain years of systematic deception and financial manipulation. 4 weeks before the complete truth buried him and destroyed everything he had carefully built. I maintained my routine of working quietly and professionally as if absolutely nothing unusual was happening. But I made absolutely sure to attend every single cross-departmental meeting where I might naturally hear updates. Patricia kept me thoroughly informed about the growing tension in client operations. People were genuinely worried. 3 weeks before the scheduled comprehensive review, something unexpected happened. The company's automated system integration updated across all platforms, synchronizing all historical records, backup files, and version histories into one unified enterprise database. Every archived file, every backup copy, every version history, every edit log suddenly became accessible and searchable in one centralized location. My real performance data, the original unedited versions that Marcus had tried so hard to bury and obscure, automatically resurfaced across the entire company network. Anyone running comparative reports would now immediately see the glaring discrepancies. I started hearing whispers in the cafeteria and hallways. People in other departments who had no direct connection to client operations began quietly noticing that Amanda Hayes, who now worked in strategy and systems, had somehow been credited with major accounts in the old archived files, but those exact same accounts showed completely different ownership in recent executive reports. Patricia told me during lunch that 2 board members had started asking pointed questions about performance attribution inconsistencies. Your name keeps coming up in these discussions. In a good way. People are starting to connect dots. The truth was spreading organically through the system like water finding every crack in concrete. And I hadn't said a single word to anyone. The evidence was simply too overwhelming to hide anymore. I received my first direct contact from executive leadership on a Thursday afternoon. The VP of Operations, whom I had never personally met, wanted to schedule a confidential call to clarify some historical project attributions and timeline questions. During the video call, she asked me very specific, detailed questions about the Thornfield account, the Morrison deal recovery, and the Patterson crisis negotiation. I answered completely honestly, providing exact dates, specific client contact names, and detailed descriptions of the strategies I had personally implemented to save each account. This aligns perfectly with what we're seeing in the archived operational records, she said carefully. Her tone professionally neutral but her interest clearly intense. But it doesn't match at all with the executive reports from that same period. I noticed some significant discrepancies when I was preparing for my transfer to strategy and systems, I admitted honestly. I assumed initially it was just a reporting error or database synchronization issue. She was silent for a long moment. Amanda, would you be willing to present your complete work history to the review committee? We're trying to establish an absolutely accurate picture of client operations performance. Your direct testimony would be extremely valuable. I agreed immediately without any hesitation. This was exactly what I had been patiently, methodically waiting for. 2 days after that revealing call with the VP, Marcus unexpectedly requested a private meeting. We sat in a small windowless conference room, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely uncertain and off balance. Amanda, I want to make sure we're completely aligned going into this compliance review, he began. his voice carefully measured but with an underlying tension. There seemed to be some unfortunate inconsistencies in how past projects were documented across different systems. I've certainly noticed that, I replied calmly. I would appreciate it if you focused exclusively on your current role during the review process. Client operations history is complex and nuanced. We don't want to confuse the committee with conflicting accounts from people who may not have the complete picture. I understood exactly what he was really asking. He wanted me to stay silent, to not contradict his fabricated narrative. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee has, I said evenly, meeting his eyes directly. Honestly and completely. I think transparency serves everyone's interests best. His expression hardened noticeably. You should be very careful about making unnecessary waves, Amanda. Your transfer to strategy and systems is still technically within the probationary period. It would be unfortunate if what? Are you threatening my position because I won't help you cover up reporting irregularities? He stood abruptly. I'm simply advising you to stay in your lane. After he left, I immediately added detailed notes about the conversation to my encrypted archive. The board review was finally scheduled for a Tuesday morning in the largest conference room. Every division leader would present their team's performance data, with independent auditors comparing all submissions directly to archived operational records in real time. The formal email from the CFO's office outlined the comprehensive agenda, comparative analysis of reported versus actual performance metrics, budget allocation verification and reconciliation, attribution accuracy assessment. Client operations was scheduled first. Marcus would present at 9 a.m. sharp. The independent auditors would present their findings immediately after at 10:30 a.m. I arrived early and sat in the observation gallery with other department managers. Patricia had saved me a seat in the second row where we would have a perfect view. The boardroom was impressive and intimidating. Dark mahogany wood panels, formal portraits of company founders, a massive polished table where 12 stern-faced executives sat reviewing thick documents. Marcus entered at precisely 8:55 a.m., Kyle trailing behind him looking pale and nervous. Both were dressed impeccably in dark suits, but I noticed Marcus's hand shaking slightly as he set up his presentation laptop. This was it. The moment where truth and deliberate manipulation would be compared side by side in front of the company's highest leadership. Everything I had worked toward, everything I had documented, was about to be validated. Marcus began his presentation at exactly 9 a.m. His voice steady despite the tension visible in his shoulders. He displayed client operations performance over the past 2 years. Impressive growth curves, strong client retention metrics, successful new account acquisition numbers. He highlighted Kyle's contributions prominently. The Thornfield account recovery, the Morrison negotiation success, revenue growth attributed to strategic leadership changes and organizational restructuring. The executives listened politely, occasionally taking notes but showing no particular reaction. Then the CFO spoke, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. Thank you, Marcus. Now let's compare these figures directly to the archived system data. She nodded to the independent auditing team. A new presentation suddenly appeared on the massive screen. Split-screen format. On the left side, Marcus's reported metrics from his executive summaries. On the right side, the actual archived operational data pulled directly from our systems. The discrepancies were impossible to ignore or explain away. The Thornfield account showed Kyle as lead on the left side. On the right, my name appeared clearly as primary account manager with 2 full years of detailed client correspondence. The Morrison recovery credited Kyle on the left. The right screen showed my complete email chain personally negotiating the contract. Budget allocations claimed by Kyle's portfolio on the left. Actual revenue sources on the right traced directly back to my managed accounts. The room fell into absolute, devastating silence. Marcus tried desperately to explain, his voice rising with defensive panic. There may be some documentation errors in the older legacy systems. During the transition to new software platforms last year, Some attribution data may have been. The lead auditor interrupted him firmly. Mr. Bellamy, these aren't software errors or migration issues. We found systematic manual edits to executive reports made specifically from your system credentials. 43 separate instances over 18 months. All after normal business hours. She clicked to another damning slide. Detailed edit logs. Precise timestamps. All clearly showing M. Bellamy accessing performance files late at night and systematically changing attribution, removing names, shifting budget allocations. Furthermore, we found clear evidence of budget misrepresentation. Revenue generated by accounts directly managed by Amanda Hayes was systematically reallocated to appear as if it originated from Kyle Henderson's portfolio. This misrepresentation totals approximately $1.4 million over 18 months. Kyle's face had gone completely white. He stared at Marcus with an expression of absolute betrayal and horror, finally understanding the full extent of the manipulation. The CFO leaned forward, her expression ice-cold. Marcus, can you explain why you deliberately altered these records? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. No words came out. His authority, his credibility, everything was disintegrating in real time. The compliance team revealed even more devastating findings. Their investigation had expanded beyond simple reporting errors into deeper systemic issues. We discovered that performance metrics for multiple employees were systematically suppressed in executive reports while one employee, Kyle Henderson, received artificially inflated attributions across the board, the lead auditor explained methodically. She displayed another comprehensive comparison slide. My client satisfaction scores. Hidden completely from executive view for 2 solid years. My revenue generation redistributed across Kyle's portfolio. My strategic initiatives, presented as collaborative team efforts with no primary attribution. Additionally, we found evidence that Amanda Hayes was being positioned as a potential scapegoat for financial irregularities that didn't actually exist. Her blocked promotion appears to have been part of a deliberate containment strategy to limit her visibility and organizational credibility. I sat completely still, processing this revelation. Marcus hadn't just stolen my achievements and sabotaged my career. He had been actively preparing to blame me if his systematic manipulation was ever discovered. The ultimate insurance policy. The CFO turned to Marcus, her expression absolutely cold. Did you systematically falsify performance records to advance Kyle Henderson's career while deliberately sabotaging Amanda Hayes? Marcus's continued silence was answer enough. His face had turned an unhealthy gray color. The investigation team spent another intensive hour presenting their complete findings. They had mapped Marcus's entire operation systematically. The network of altered reports, budget manipulations, suppressed performance data, and manufactured success metrics. Kyle's entire career at this company was built completely on stolen credit, redirected resources, and fabricated achievements. Every promotion, every bonus, every recognition had been engineered through systematic deception. The auditors also revealed they had found that 2 other employees had been similarly marginalized. Their achievements quietly redistributed to create the illusion of Kyle's competence. This goes beyond individual misconduct, the CFO stated firmly. This represents a fundamental breach of corporate integrity, financial transparency, and ethical leadership principles. She looked directly at Marcus with undisguised contempt. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position pending criminal investigation. Kyle Henderson, your employment is under review given the extent of unearned advancement. Kyle stood shakily, his face a mixture of shock, anger, and humiliation. He glared at Marcus once with pure hatred, then walked out without a single word. Marcus gathered his materials slowly, his movements mechanical and defeated. On his way out, his eyes found mine across the crowded room. No words, no excuses. Just the devastating recognition that he had catastrophically underestimated the wrong person. 3 weeks after that board meeting, the CFO called me to her corner office. Amanda, we've completed our comprehensive review of client operations performance. Your actual contributions were exceptional, far exceeding what was reported to leadership or reflected in your compensation. She slid a formal folder across her polished desk. Inside was an offer letter on company letterhead. We'd like you to lead the complete restructuring of client operations. Director level. Full authority to rebuild systems, processes, and team structure. We need someone who understands both the operational work and the critical importance of transparent reporting. I looked at the offer carefully. Director. The exact position Marcus had held. The level I should have reached 2 years ago. This isn't compensation for what happened, she continued seriously. This is based on your demonstrated competence, your integrity during an extremely difficult situation, and the company's urgent need for leadership we can actually trust. I accepted on the spot. 2 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Marcus had announced Kyle's promotion. My team, rebuilt carefully with people who genuinely valued truth and competence, sat around the table. We were implementing comprehensive new performance tracking systems with full transparency, complete audit trails, and multiple verification layers. Patricia was now my deputy director. The 2 other employees Marcus had marginalized received overdue promotions. Kyle found work at a smaller firm after resigning. Marcus faced criminal charges for financial fraud. But the real victory wasn't the title or the settlement. It was the new system we built, one where manipulation couldn't hide in shadows, where truth was documented and verifiable, where competence was recognized. He tried to erase me from the records. Instead, the records erased him.